right, so this video is about traditional environmental knowledge, DEK, or native science, as Greg Cajete calls it. And I'd like to start with just asking a few questions of myself, which I don't know the answers. One is, who decides what TEK is, and who owns it? Most all of the people on the planet came from indigenous beginnings. We were all once tribal, and we've educated ourselves away from a lot of that thinking. TEK, or native science, works on the premise of the individual is not an individual as the self. It is a combination of the family. It's the tribe, or the group, and a lot of people, when they first think about TEK, they think of survivalist skills. TEK is older than survivalist skills. These are ideas in science that were proven through observation, repetitive science, where people developed methods to plant crops, to move people to where food sources or water sources were. Rainwater harvesting is a good example of a long-term traditional science where groups of people for 1,000 years have been collecting water to store for the winter or for later use in the dry season. So traditional knowledge, in my opinion, starts with the idea about our relationship to the planet, and the best way to find that out is to start getting up with the sun, greet the sun in the morning, like so many indigenous groups do. Greet the sun in the morning, watch the sun move across the horizon day after day after day. Those knowledges would have given people the idea of when to move to better locations for their food harvests. So many of the people who collected information about tribal groups of North America, their method of research was very poor. They did not consider tribal people as being having scientific knowledge. They considered them as savages and basically survivalist skills. But these people had already been here for 1,000 years, and the soils were managed well, the forests were burned back, the undergrowth was kept down. Those are traditional science. That's things that were handed down over and over for past generations. So there's an answer to who owns some of this science. In my research, I did not ask a scientist from a museum questions about traditional science. I went and asked traditional elders. And when they said that my mother or my grandmother taught me this, and their grandmother taught me this, I began to understand traditional science. So often when we look for answers in traditional knowledge, we look for them in stories, in storytelling. Going for a walk in a story, those places of reference were knowledgeable to people of the time, not only in the past, but today. So you're looking at moving camp across the desert. The story would tell you where the next water hole or where water resource was be at that time, because many of the movements were based on either star movements or where the sun was on the horizon. Now we've asked people to go out and record their walk. So often we look at indigenous people have been migratory for so many generations until recent 100 years when they were then stationary. And they could tell the story about moving across the country, and they would talk about landmarks. And so to be in a certain place at a certain time were based on traditional knowledge, traditional stories. When we try to share the story, we first forget that these are tribal people. Now, when I say that, we have to look through science in multiple lenses. And the lens you have to look through in traditional knowledge is that the people were raised as a family, as a group. And so you always thought of the group as, and you didn't think about the group as myself, separate from the group. It were always the group. Now my grandfather told me when I was young that when you get to a certain age, as a young boy, you'll use the term I did this, I did that, I did this, I went this place, and I got something. And he said at a point after going fasting or the ceremonies, you will start to learn that actually there is no such thing as I. It is we. We, as a people, as a tribal people, we look at ourselves as generational. My father was this, my grandfather was that. They are who I am. My mother's parents, my father's parents, back to the beginning of time. So we can never really look at the world as being something as for me. Copernicus said, we're not the center of the universe. And it's so true, we're not. The sun doesn't rise, we awaken to the sun. And after you watch it for a period of time, you'll start to hear the birds sing different songs as different groups move through, as they're migrating north or south, such as geese or different songbirds. You'll start to realize that nature is traditional science. It is traditional knowledge, knowing the sky, knowing the movement of the stars so that we can know how to navigate across great bodies of water. Traditional science is something that is passed down generation to generation to generation. And so often now we look at elders who have been put through boarding schools and re-educated and brainwashed, and we ask them to explain to us native science, and they can't because so many of them have lost that connection, and it's been replaced. Originally thinking, earth, wind, fire, and water, and those things have been, replaced by gas, liquid, solids, and heat. We've got to go back to the beginning, to where we're looking at our planet as earth, wind, fire, and water. And what do we need to survive long-term, generational, not just for the self. And when we start to look at those things like that, we begin to understand that a lot of traditional science, or traditional knowledge, is common sense. You don't waste the water. You spread the water amongst the things that are living or store it. So as we try to find out what is traditional science, what is traditional knowledge, and what is native science, what we find out is that so many of the things could be applicable in today's world, because so often it looks like we've gotten farther away from natural science. And people will now say, I know survival skills. Traditional science isn't necessarily survival skills as we think about it. They were skills on how to live their life, different than when we go to the grocery store. They went to the field, they went to the prairies, they went to the mountains, and they knew when to harvest. They knew when the great buffalo herds were coming. They knew it by how the grasses grew, and as the sun moved across the horizon, they knew where the buffaloes would be, and they harvested them. That's traditional knowledge. Now, so often, animals are put in pens, and so the animals don't get to even learn about how to migrate or how to move to where the grasses are greener. So I welcome you to this idea of traditional science and traditional knowledge. You can't find it in the museum, and yet you can by some of the things that were saved. But a lot of the items that were saved, those collections weren't necessarily from the source. They may have been handed down a couple of generations. And we don't know what some of the symbols mean, though people will say they do. We don't actually know what was in the artist's mind when they made the symbols. And that's just very poor research methods of science over the last couple hundred years in the Americas. Three-sister gardening it was very popular in recent years about getting people to knowledge about growing things, getting them back into the earth. And this is a very positive idea on actually watching things grow and nurturing them. But first, remember, in order to understand traditional science, you need to understand that we are doing this for the whole. Not only for the people who've been here, but for the people who are coming. It is for traditional science, traditional knowledge, is to share. But again, it is property of individuals. Some families, especially design, art, those symbols were passed down from generation to generation. It may have been a religious ceremony that caused that symbol to be given to those people. And it is not ours to steal it. It is ours to ask and be respectful about how we go forward with indigenous people. So that's a little bit, getting up, looking at the sun in the morning, seeing the sun go to sleep. That's all good things. They're good memories. They smell, feel the air, smell for the rain, smell, see what's going on in our planet. Get connected back to the source, earth, wind, fire, and water. So I hope that doesn't confuse, but maybe helps. So thank you very much. Mm-hmm.